Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Wise Practice Podcast. I'm Amy Dover, licensed marriage and family therapist, owner of Dover Counseling Services in Alabama, and a Wise Practice consultant. This is episode 2 in a 4-part series for the month of June, and I'm so glad that you are hanging out with me today. And you can spend your time listening to so many other podcasts, and so I'm grateful that you're spending this time with me today. So, today we are going to be talking about one of the most exciting and terrifying milestones in the life of a practice owner: hiring your first therapist. And I want to start with a story. I love stories. I'm a therapist. We love stories. But I want to start with a story because I think it captures everything you need to know about what this moment actually feels like versus what you think it's going to feel like. Let me set the scene. It was a Wednesday around lunchtime. I was early in building my practice. I had just hired my first therapist. She had been with me, I guess, maybe 3 months or so by that point. She was a friend and a former coworker, which we are told to never hire those, but that's a story for another episode. And I overheard her telling another person who worked in our building that she was, quote, really tired. She had already seen 10 clients that week and she was just going to take the rest of the week off. I stood there and I felt my whole body go cold. 10 clients. It's Wednesday. The rest of the week off. And in my head, I'm doing math at lightning speed. Rent is due. There are clients on the schedule. And if she's not seeing them, am I seeing them? Do I see them? What is happening right now? Do I need to hire someone else? And that was the moment I realized nobody told me it was going to be like this. Nobody told me any of it. And so today, I want to give you some context for that Wednesday moment because I think my story is actually really common among practice owners who came up the way that I did. And I've been in the field, I've been a therapist for over 20 years, and there have been just such huge changes in our profession over that period of time that you're going to understand what I mean when I say who came up the way I did. So before I opened Over Counseling, I had worked in group practices. I had worked in community mental health and group homes and stuff too, but most recently, before I opened my own place, I had worked in group practices. That was really the world that I knew best. And in a group practice, from what I could tell, the model was pretty simple. You get busy, you hire. Referrals come in, caseloads fill up, you bring on another therapist. Nobody sits around having deep strategic conversations about it. You just do it. And that was the culture that I was formed in. So when I opened my solo practice in January of 2015, and within 3 months, I could no longer take more clients, referrals were coming in fast, and I was starting to turn people away. My instinct was exactly what it had always been. I need to hire. So I hired. I didn't think too hard about it. I just knew I needed another set of hands and I didn't want to turn work away. And here's what I want to say about that instinct. It wasn't wrong. The instinct to grow when demand is there is not a bad instinct, but I had no infrastructure, no systems. Couldn't even have told you what system meant, right? Other than I'm a systemically trained marriage and family therapist. That was the only system I understood then. But I had no systems. I had no contracts, no clear expectations, no real understanding of what it meant to be someone's employer rather than just their colleague. I had the instinct without the foundation. And I did what a lot of practice owners do when they don't have a roadmap. I looked at what other practice owners were doing and I copied them. How are you handling compensation? Huh, okay, I'll do that. What does your contract look like? Can I borrow it? Yeah, okay, I'll use that. I'll use something like that. And it felt responsible because at least I was doing something. Except, and this is the part that took me a while to fully reckon with, a lot of those owners didn't know what they were doing either. We were all just copying each other. And half the problematic compensation structures, the unclear expectations, the hiring mistakes that practice owners make today exist because one owner copied another owner who copied someone else, and nobody actually did the math or asked whether any of it made sense. So, the first thing I want to say to you today is this. Don't build your practice by copying someone else's. Build it by understanding your own numbers, your own values, your own vision, and letting and getting guidance from people who have actually done the work to figure this out. And also, with a whole lot of leading from the Holy Spirit. Incidentally, that's exactly what I'm doing now, which I love the consulting piece, walking practice owners through how they collaborate with God to build the practice that fits them. But we're going to get to that. Okay, so let's go back to that Wednesday moment. Let me tell you the full picture because the overhearing the conversation moment was not even the most revealing part of that story. The most revealing part was what happened right before it. When I hired my first therapist, I did not have a contract. I was a 1099 practice at the time because that's what everyone else was. So I did that too. And so I was a 1099 practice. And at the time, I just hadn't written a contract yet. I hadn't really thought that hard about it, honestly. I was not under contract at the previous group practice I was at. So why are contracts important? I figured we knew each other. We were professionals. We figured out, and it was fine until it wasn't on that Wednesday at noon. It wasn't fine at all. So when I overheard that conversation, I realized in an instant that I had never actually told her what I expected, how many clients a week was reasonable, what the minimum even looked like, what it meant to be part of a practice versus being a solo clinician renting space. I had hired her into my world and assumed that she would just know because she was a good therapist, because we had worked together before, because she was a professional. But here's the thing, she wasn't being difficult. She wasn't being lazy. She was doing exactly what she had been trained to do, operate as an autonomous clinician, making her own decisions. Nobody had told her the rules were different here because I hadn't told her, because I didn't fully know that the rules were different yet either. That realization that I was now responsible for someone else's productivity, that her choices had direct financial impact and consequences for the practice, that I needed to actually lead and not just assume, that hit me like a freight train standing in that hallway on a Wednesday afternoon. I went straight to my office and started thinking about how to create a contract, which wasn't great, by the way, because I was trying to problem solve in a panic with no templates, no attorney, no guidance, but it was a start. And what it forced me to do was get clear for the first time on what I actually expected from someone who worked at Dover Counseling, how many clients, what the schedule looked like, how to handle paperwork, how to return messages, how to communicate with admin, how to represent the practice. And here's the thing I wish somebody had told me before I ever hired anyone. Your new therapist is going to look to you for direction, not because they're incompetent, but because every practice does things differently and they are stepping into your world. They need to know how you do things here, how you handle intake, how you communicate with clients, how you manage the administrative side of your caseload. They are not going to just figure it out. They need you to lead them. And if you haven't thought about what leading actually looks like, you will feel it the moment that first person comes on board. Nobody told me that. I hadn't even thought to think about it or ask about it. I thought I was just adding a clinician to a growing practice, as I had always seen before. What I was actually doing was becoming someone's employer and leader. Those are very different things. And the sooner you understand that distinction, the better off you and your first hire are going to be. So let's talk about readiness. I work with practice owners at different stages through my consulting work, and I see same patterns over and over. And I want to name some of the signs that tell me gently but clearly that someone is not quite ready to hire yet, even if they think they are. The first one is the most practical. They don't have consistent referrals coming in. I cannot say this clearly enough. You need to have a steady, reliable pipeline of referrals before you hire someone, not after. I have watched practice owners hire a therapist and then scramble to fill their caseload. hoping the referrals will show up once the therapist is there. We're trying to figure out all the marketing needs after the therapist has already been hired. It's so stressful for the owner and frustrating for the therapist, and it puts enormous financial pressure on you and unfair pressure on the new hire. Referrals first, hire second. That's the order. The second sign is fear, specifically fear of being seen as an employer, fear of being judged by your hire, fear of having authority over someone else's professional life. I understand this fear deeply, especially for therapists, because we are trained to be collaborative and relational, and we don't necessarily love hierarchies. The idea of being the boss can feel deeply uncomfortable, but if you haven't done some work on that, it'll show up in your hiring, your onboarding, and your leadership in ways that can create some real problems. Third, understanding the front end work. A lot of practice owners look at a group practice from the outside and think, I just need to hire someone and split the work. I mean, that's what I thought. What they don't see is everything that has to be in place before that hire can be successful. Systems, onboarding, clear expectations, contracts and agreements, a way to track productivity, a culture that someone can actually step into. And yes, a solo practice has a culture. Building all of that takes significant time and energy before it ever pays off. And if you're not prepared for that investment, the first hire will feel like it's drowning you. And then there's the one I see most often in Christian practice owners specifically. And I say this with so much love because I have done this myself. Hiring a square peg for a round hole. You interview someone and something feels a little off. The values aren't quite aligned, or the clinical approach isn't quite what you're looking for, or your gut is telling you something your heart is trying to override, or maybe the Holy Spirit is telling you not to make this hiring decision, but you talk yourself into it anyway. You think, I'll train them, I'll invest in them, they'll come around. They usually don't. 98% of the time, they don't come around. And so this is why we need processes and a roadmap on what we're going to do when it comes to hiring a therapist. Because if you do it like that, if you hire that square peg for that round hole, what you end up with typically is months of energy poured into someone who is never quite the right fit, while the practice absorbs the cost of that mismatch. It is so much harder to unwind a bad hire than to hold out for the right one. And for Christian practice owners in particular, there's often that compassion element. Someone needs a job, they seem like a good person, you want to help. Those are beautiful impulses, but they are not a hiring strategy. Hire for fit, for values, and for readiness, not because someone needs the opportunity. So let's talk for a minute about what readiness actually looks like, because I don't want this episode to feel like a list of reasons not to hire. I want it to help you accurately assess where you are. And if you're ready, I want you to feel that clearly and then move forward with confidence. The clearest sign that you are ready to hire is a consistent growing waitlist with referrals coming in regularly, not a good week here and there, a pattern. If you are turning people away because you are genuinely out of capacity, that is the market telling you it's time. That is demand outpacing supply, and it is exactly the foundation you need to bring someone else on. You're also ready when you can articulate your values and culture clearly enough to hire for them. When someone else is sitting across from you in an interview and you can tell them, here's what we believe, here's how we operate, here's what it means to be part of this team, and you mean it and you can back it up. Because the right hire is not just someone with a license or just someone who's breathing, it's someone who fits who you are and where you're going. You're ready when you have the basic infrastructure in place, or you're at least actively building it. You don't have to have everything perfect because your systems will never be perfect. They will always need to be reassessed. You don't have to have every system buttoned up before you bring someone else on, but you do need to have thought about it. You need a contract or an employment agreement. You need a way to handle scheduling and billing and intake. You need enough structure that someone can step into your practice and function. And maybe most importantly, you're ready when you're genuinely willing to lead, when you're ready to step out in faith and follow what you believe God is calling you to do. Not just clinically supervise, not just collaborate as equals, but lead. Set expectations, give feedback, hold people accountable, make hard calls when necessary. That willingness to step into the employer role, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's new, that is what separates practice owners who grow successfully from those who stay stuck. And if you're sitting there nodding at that list, if the referrals are there, the values are clear, the structure is coming together, and you feel the pull to grow, I want you to pay attention to that. Okay, I want to ask you something that goes a little deeper than systems and referral pipelines, because I think a lot of Christian practice owners, for us, the question of whether to hire isn't really a practical question at its core. It's a faith question. Are you hesitating on God's calling? Because here's what I see in some of the practice owners I work with who are stuck at solo. The referrals are there. The demand is real. The capacity to grow exists, but they're frozen. And when we dig into it, what we almost always find underneath the practical concerns is fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being responsible for someone else, fear of being seen, fear of stepping into something bigger than what they've always known. And I want to ask you gently but directly, is it possible that your fear and your self doubt are keeping you in the same place while God is trying to move you forward? Is it possible that what feels like wisdom, staying small, staying safe, staying in control, is actually just fear with a reasonable and responsible sounding explanation? Because here's what I know about building a group practice from 11 years of doing it: it is an adventure. Probably, well, outside of being a wife and mother, definitely the hardest adventure, but most exhilarating adventure that I've ever been on. It is hard and it is stretching and it will require things from you that you don't currently have. It will push you past your comfort zone regularly. And it is also one of the most meaningful things you can do with your calling. Because when you build a team of strong therapists who share your values, you multiply that impact. You serve more people. You reach further into your community. You build something that outlasts you. Legacy. Think about what it could look like. A team built around shared values and faith, serving your community at a level you could never reach alone, extending the reach of what God has called you to do, not just in your individual counseling room, but through a whole practice of people who believe what you believe and care what you care about. That is not just a business decision, that is kingdom work. And I want to ask you, are you willing to learn, grow, and stretch beyond your comfort zone to do it? Are you willing to say yes to the adventure he's calling you to? Don't say no to him. If this episode described where you are, if you're sitting on a wait list, having to turn people away, feeling the pull to grow, wrestling with the fear of what it means to hire, I want to tell you about something I'm doing specifically for you. In July, I'm launching a mastermind group called Built to Last, growing from a solo practice to a group. It is for Christian practice owners who are either ready to make their first hire or who have maybe hired their first therapist and are ready to grow bigger and who are done trying to figure it out alone. We start July 9th and we'll run for 6 months. We'll finish a couple of weeks before Christmas. We'll meet live every other week and we'll go deep on the things that actually move the needle: systems, financials, marketing, compensation strategies for both admin and clinical staff, money mindset, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, and one of the most important shifts you will ever make as a practice owner: learning to think and lead like a CEO instead of a clinician. Because that shift, that is everything. And it is so much easier when you're walking through it with people who are in it with you and who get it. This is the room I wish had existed when I was 3 months into my solo practice, turning people away, hiring a friend without a contract, and hearing her say she needed the rest of the week off, just learning everything the hard way. It's a room full of people who share your faith, understand your world, and are committed to building something that lasts. If that sounds like what you've been looking for, I want you to check it out. If you sign up before June 18th, you'll get the early bird discount, which is $50 off the monthly rate. And if you're a Wise Practice community member, you'll get $100 off per month. If you're a community member and you sign up by the early bird date, you're going to get $150 off per month. That is amazing, y'all. It's great. All the details and registration are at wisepracticeconsulting.com/masterminds, and that link will also be in today's show notes. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. The work that you're doing matters. Um, we have been given the opportunity to just be God's vessels and do beautiful work in His world. And what a privilege that is! What a privilege. The practice that you're building, the one that's a little bigger than what you have right now, the one that reaches further and serves more and reflects your values, it's possible. You just need the right foundation and the right people around you. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next episode.